Good morning and welcome to Market Cafe with me Ankur, Mishra and Kanishka. Sarkar. In next 1 hour we'll bring you all the news and updates that matters to you before opening of market, and a lot of news flow overnight, right from World Bank to US China. But let's get started with US markets first. Good morning Kanishka, how were US markets yesterday?
Good morning Ankur. Well, they did end on a positive note. The S&P 500 that rose more than 0.5%, posting a third straight session that was positive. The broad market index now sits less than 2% off the high it notched in February. The Nasdaq Composite, on the other hand, that also added more than 0.5%, while the 30-stock Dow Jones Industrial Average that climbed 0.3%. However, stock futures ticked slightly lower after regular trading as investors sought details on the trade policy consensus that was reached between US and China overnight. They're also anticipating the release of May's consumer inflation report this later in the day. Now, just for more context, now US and Chinese officials have reached a consensus on trade after their second day of talks in London. Now, US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has said that he and US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer will return to Washington to make sure President Trump approves this framework. Now, apart from that, of course, May inflation data, as I said earlier, is due today. On the earnings front, traders will be watching out for reports from Chewy and Oracle. But how are things looking on the crude front, Ankur?
Yes, crude is also steading towards a level of $66 if you talk about Brent crude, and WTI around 64. In fact, both Brent crude as well as gold edged lower amid US-China trade talks, which is moving forward. And apart from that, dollar is also holding at 99 level, while US 10-year yield has slipped.
That's right. Now, moving on, let's also take a look at some of the cues that we should be watching out for today. In the US, as I said, CPI inflation data is due later in the day. Apart from that, federal budget balance is also something that we'll be watching out for. In Japan, we have the PPI data coming today. In terms of corporate action back home, City Union Bank and City Union Bank is expected to mull fundraising today. Apart from that, Hindustan Zinc's board is expected to mull a dividend. Now, it's also the last day to be eligible for dividends when it comes to Trent, Tata Chemicals and ICICI Prudential.
Kanishka was hinting earlier. Now let's get started with some top global news headlines. Right, in 2 days of trade talks between US-China, both countries have reached a consensus. US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said that both the countries have reached a framework to implement the Geneva Trade Consensus, and that happened after high-level talks held in London. Remember, Chinese restrictions on rare earth exports to US are fundamental part of the latest agreement. Lutnick also said that he, along with US Trade Representative Jamieson, will head back to Washington to make sure President Trump approves the framework. Remember, the framework will be implemented only if both the presidents approve it.
That's right. We have lots of global news flow coming in, and the World Bank has sharply cut its global economic growth projections, citing disruptions from trade uncertainty. Now, the World Bank expects the global economy to expand by 2.3% in 2025, which is down from the earlier projections of 2.7%. Now, the bank said this would mark the slowest rate of global growth since 2008, aside from the outright global recessions. Now, it also cut its 2025 growth forecast for US by 0.9 percentage points to 1.4% and reduced its euro area GDP expectations by 0.3 percentage points to 0.7%.
Focus to General Motors, which plans to invest $4 billion in 3 US assembly plants, which also includes moving or increasing production of 2 Mexican-produced vehicles to US plants. This comes after few indications of progress in trade talks between Trump administration and Mexican leaders. Remember, this earlier President Trump implemented 25% tariffs on imported vehicles and 25% tariffs on several auto parts imported into United States.
That's right. Let's also shift focus to the tech space then. Now, tech giant Google has offered buyouts to employees across several divisions. Now, this comes after the company's latest effort to reduce headcount, which Google has been implementing in waves since laying off 12,000 employees in 2023. Now, some teams have been mandated return to office for remote workers who live within 50 miles. Now, remember, the buyouts come after finance chief in October said that one of her top priorities would be to drive more cost cutting as Google expands its spending on artificial intelligence infrastructure in 2025.
So let's shift focus back to India. A team of top US negotiators held closed-door meetings between their counterparts from June 4 to June 10. Remember, these meetings were actually extended. The US trade representatives were supposed to end their week last week, but later on it was extended till 2 days till the 10th of June. We will connect with Sumita Karir, who will have more details on this story. But let's move on where we can take a break, actually, quick break. After that, the global news updates will continue and we'll also tell you how markets are performing.
Mishra. Well, it's time now to get you some more news updates on the global front. The tensions are escalating for the 5th day in a row in Los Angeles after protests against immigration and customs enforcement gripped the city, with demonstrators clashing with law enforcement and setting vehicles on fire downtown. The Los Angeles mayor issued a curfew for the city's downtown following several days of intense protests against ICE raids that saw clashes between demonstrators and law enforcement, widespread vandalism and some looting as well. Now, across the country, marchers similarly took to streets in the New York City in an anti-ICE protest that began in Foley Square, across from where immigration enforcement operations have been centered. Now, protests have also been seen in San Francisco, Boston, Dallas, Chicago, Atlanta, and more. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has said that the protests were an assault on peace and public order.
मैं नरेंद्र दामोदर दास मोदी ईश्वर की शपथ लेता हूं, मैं विधि द्वारा स्थापित भारत के संविधान के प्रति सच्ची श्रद्धा और निष्ठा रखूंगा। प्रधानमंत्री जन धन योजना के अंतर्गत खाते खुलवाए। अन्नदाता को ऊर्जादाता बनाने के साथ ही उर्वरक दाता बनाने पर भी है। आयुष्मान भारत के तहत 5 लाख रुपए तक का मुफ्त इलाज मिलता रहेगा। सिर्फ 1 रुपया महीना पर दुर्घटना बीमा, 90 पैसे प्रतिदिन के प्रीमियम पर जीवन बीमा किया जा रहा है। 10 करोड़ ग्रामीण परिवार पाइप से स्वच्छ पानी की सुविधा से जुड़ चुके हैं।
The Narendra Modi government led NDA completes 11 years in power, the Bharatiya Janata Party hails this period as golden era of transformative governance, while the opposition calls it time for unfulfilled promises. Let's take a closer look. The Modi government highlights a decade of economic growth, with India's GDP now at $4.2 trillion, positioning the nation to soon become the world's third largest democracy. Infrastructure has seen a major push, with operational airports rising from 74 in 2014 to 160 today, and plans to reach 300 by 2047, a time where we aim for Viksit Bharat. The digital revolution, driven by initiatives like UPI and Jan Dhan Aadhaar Mobile Trinity, has reshaped financial inclusion. In defense, modernization and self-reliance are key, while the surge in exports and the launch of India's first indigenous aircraft carrier is in queue. The government also takes pride in national security milestones like Operation Sindoor and the abrogation of Article 370, alongside social welfare schemes empowering women and marginalized communities. Let's listen into what Prahlad Joshi, Union Minister, had to say.
पॉलिसी पैरालिसिस एक कॉमन चीज बन गया था देश में. अंडर द लीडरशिप ऑफ प्राइम मिनिस्टर श्री मोदी ये पॉलिसी पैरालिसिस हमने पूरा खत्म कर दिया. ये गवर्नमेंट अंडर द लीडरशिप ऑफ प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी, दिस इज द मोस्ट डिसिसिव गवर्नमेंट आफ्टर इंडिपेंडेंस. Even when they are having such a huge majority, better majority than Prime Minister Modi, the decisive government was not so active. Even they are not at all decisive rather. तो डिसिसिव निर्णायक सरकार नहीं थे. अभी हमारा सरकार निर्णायक सरकार है.
We also caught up with a whole host of experts, including Karan Verma and Gaurav Sen, to understand what the key highlights were of the Modi government in the past 11 years. Let's listen into what they had to say.
One of the areas where I would love to see the government invest more is perhaps AI, machine learning and automation, because that's going to be a very serious challenge to the jobs. I would love to see the government come up with a clear, coherent policy on that and perhaps a dedicated ministry to that, because that's going to be one of the challenges. You know, when we have doubling of airports, when we have road construction going up, the traditional, conventional, hard jobs are still very much intact. In fact, they've seen a greater growth. In fact, if I would talk about the wealth per household, that has increased massively. That's gone leaps and bounds ahead. And also we need some perspective here as to where we were. I mean, we were at a stage where we have tap water connections and toilets in all villages. So we need to, take it step by step. Today, we've reached a place where we've given 12 crore toilets and 12 crore tap water connections. Only then can you empower them for jobs and other things.
One is job creation. The other question is the role of the government. How much can the government do in the arena of job creation? So I think the role of the government is to create an enabling environment and also create an environment of stability which will attract investment. And I think among all emerging markets, we can clearly say that India is on a stronger footing. If you look at the fiscal trajectory, for example, there's a lot of focus on how US government debt to GDP, fiscal deficit to GDP is an unsustainable path. But you look at the way the central government fiscal deficit, central government debt to GDP, state government fiscal deficit, state government debt to GDP, we are on a much more sustainable path, and we have navigated shocks such as COVID and even the other. For example, we have a current account deficit which is very narrow, it's less than 1% of GDP. So fostering an environment of macro stability which will also attract investment, I think that has also been achieved. For example,
as Prime Minister Narendra Modi completes the first year of third term, here is a look at how the market fared during past year. Sharad is here with more details.
Well, Modi 3.0, how the markets have actually performed, and of course Sensex, that's up 14%, Nifty 15%. Compared with the global peers, they have actually outperformed Dow Jones and even S&P 500. Of course, there is an exception, Nasdaq and DAX going up higher. than the Sensex and Nifty numbers. Also, apart from this, FTC, Nikkei, Hang Seng, if you look at these numbers, they are also very different, and especially Hang Seng, that's up 31% range bound for all the other indices which are being shown in the screen. Now let's look at how the sectors have performed. Overall, a mid-cap segment 21% up, small cap 20%, auto not participating in the rally 3%, FMCG also flattish, but defense, that is a very important segment, that's up 50% in Modi 3.0. IT pharma largely remaining range bound, Nifty bank surprisingly 21% up. PSC and PSU bank segment, that has actually hurt, both of them down between 24 to 46 odd percent, and metals coming in at only a 6% growth. Now the crypto, how that changes has happened. Of course, it's a global asset class. Bitcoin is up 56%, but Ether, that's a stable coin, that's down 29 odd percent. Now, of course, let's look at who are the Nifty top gainers and losers. In this list, we are having Shriram Finance, Zomato, recent inclusion, BEL, Bajaj Finance and Airtel making it to the list. While for the Nifty losers, it includes IndusInd Bank at the top, followed by Adani Enterprises, Tata Motors, Hero MotoCorp and Asian Paints as well. But of course, let's look at the key achievements which have come in this Modi 3.0, and the list of achievements is long. First one being, of course, the important wins coming in Maharashtra and Haryana, a historic return in the Delhi elections after 26 years. That's a major achievement coming from the government. The Waqf Amendment Bill, that also passed out. Apart from this, Operation Sindoor was there post the Pahalgam terrorist attack, and that was a big success. Angel tax also being abolished, and a relief coming in the startup ecosystem. And also lastly, India becoming the third largest economy. So Modi 3.0 is filled with key achievements, and also the markets have given a green signal.
All right, thank you, Sharad, for getting us all those details. But with that, it's time to take a very short breather on this edition of Market Cafe. So we'll slip into a break, but don't go anywhere. More news and updates coming up on the other side.
When the stakes are high and the answers are elusive, there's one voice unafraid to challenge the status.
So you can see Nikkei is up around 0.5%, and more importantly, Shanghai and Hang Seng are mirroring each other around 0.7% gain each. You can see exact gain of 0.7% each in Hang Seng as well as in Shanghai. But more importantly, also bring on the screen Kospi, which is up around 2%, and this is fifth consecutive day of gain in Kospi. And even Australian markets are inching towards 0.5% gain. Remember, there is an inflation number which is expected this week on 12th of June. So all across green sign coming in, green signals coming in from Asian markets, and even Nifty implied open has now inched towards 20 points gain as we speak. So positive signals coming in from Asia, and even Nifty implied open is indicating a positive start. But moving on, FSDC meet outcome is now there, and remember there was a meeting which was held which was chaired by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, and FSDC not only discussed about economy, it also discussed about key issues like KYC, digital frauds, and also sought strategy to increase the investment ratio. The regulators were also asked to expedite the unclaimed funds, and this is not just for banks but also insurance and other regulators were part of the meeting. Remember, even SEBI, IFSCA, IRDAI, all regulators were part of the meeting, which was chaired by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. And there were also discussion on the economy front while the global headwinds remain, how India is performing. All those issues were discussed in the FSDC meeting, which was held in Mumbai yesterday.
That's right. Let's also move on to another exclusive now. Now, in a bid to bring certainty in passenger charts and eliminate anxiety among passengers, railways may finalize reservation charts 24 hours before the departure of the train rather than the current 4 hours. Samir is here with all the details.
In a major move that aims to bring a ticketing reform and also to end the anxiety or the uncertainty, the Railway Ministry is exploring the possibility of finalizing the passenger chart 24 hours prior to the departure of the train. As of now, the chart is being prepared 4 hours before the departure of the train, but now the Railway Ministry is exploring to prepare this chart, to finalize the chart not just 4 or 10 but 24 hours prior to the departure of the train. Not just this, a senior or the top level railway official has confirmed and has informed that the trials has begun. The trials, it is ongoing in Bikaner division on couple of train, and based on the trials outcome, certain assessment will be done. If certain tweakings is required, that will be done, and then the Railway Ministry is looking to roll it out on a pan-India basis. So that's the major ticketing reform. But why this reform that Railways is looking at? So government understands that this will help to bring a lot of clarity to the passengers, especially those who travel a long distance to come to the station and then to take their train. For example, a passenger traveling from Mumbai to Pune or from Pune to Mumbai to catch a train. So once a chart is prepared 24 hours before the departure of the train, then the passenger will have a better clarity, and then they can, if the ticket is waitlisted, then they can make the alternate travel plans as well. So that's the larger goal that the Railway Ministry is looking at. From the ticketing perspective, if you see, the 84% of all the 100% ticketing that is done, of this 84% is done through IRCTC, or you can say it is online ticket. Rest is done through the window tickets. So the government understands that the rollout of this initiative won't be a major challenging problem. It will be, it can be easily achieved. As of now, the trials has begun, but that's the major reform that the ministry is looking at, that preparing or finalizing the chart, the passenger chart, 24 hours before the departure of the train.
Thanks, Samir, for all those details. Remember, if this is implemented, it will be a major reform because till 4 hours, many of the passengers are clueless what happens on the ticket front. And also, take a look at IRCTC today when it starts trading. But moving on, Maruti Suzuki has cut near-term EV production target by 2/3, revising the April to September output to 8,200 units. My colleague Nivedna is joining in with more details.
India's auto giant Maruti Suzuki has decided to drastically cut its production target for its debut electric SUV, the e-Vitara, by nearly 70% for the April to September window. Now, instead of the earlier planned 26,500 units, the company will now produce only around 8,200 during this period. And the reason? Well, a shortage of rare earth materials which are crucial for EV components like permanent magnets used in electric motors. Now, with China being the dominant supplier, ongoing export restrictions have created a choke point for global supply chains. In fact, ET now reached out to Maruti Suzuki for a comment, but it refused to comment on our queries. However, sources have confirmed the production cut notably. Now, Maruti Suzuki plans to pull through its full year target of producing 67,000 EVs by March 2026, indicating a potential scale up in the second half of the fiscal year. But the situation clearly underscores continued challenges in securing critical materials for India's EV rollout.
All right, thank you, Nivedana, for getting us all those details. But moving on, the Maharashtra government has approved a hike in excise duty on India-made foreign liquor, country liquor, and imported alcohol. Now, the government has also cleared the introduction of a new category, Maharashtra-made liquor, in a bid to expand the state's revenue base. Anurag Shah is joining us with all the details.
Liquor prices in Mumbai and other parts of Maharashtra to go up as the Maharashtra government has given a note to new liquor policy, revamped liquor policy with the increased excise duty. So new liquor policy will generate additional revenue of 14,000 crores. So as per the new policy, excise duty on Indian-made foreign liquor is hiked from 3 times to 4.5 times of cost. For country liquor, duty is up from 180 rupees to 205 rupees per proof liter. And for Indian-made foreign liquor, duty is capped at 260 rupees per bulk liter. There is a revision in retail prices which also been notified for 180 ml liquor. So for country liquor, the price is 80 rupees. For Maharashtra made liquor, the price is 148 rupees. For Indian made foreign liquor, the price is 205 rupees. And for premium foreign liquor, the price is 360 rupees for 180 ml. So there's a new category also introduced which will be called Maharashtra made liquor. It's a grain based spirits by local manufacturers only. So there's a new category also introduced under the new liquor policy. So focus is to generate more revenue, higher revenue, and better regulation under the new policy. And the new policy will give additional revenue of 14,000 crore.
Thanks, Anurag, for all those details. And my colleague Ravinder is now ready to give a daily dose of stocks which are in news. Ravinder, over to you.
Vodafone Idea can be in focus, where company has launched 5G services in Bangalore, and as an introductory offer, VI is providing unlimited 5G data to users on plans starting from $299. Apart from this, Wipro can be in focus, where Wipro has extended its strategic partnership with Metro AG for 2 years to strengthen IT's operation using AI, cloud and digital services. Moving to next, on back of order win, Texmaco Rail can be in focus, as the company has where Mumbai Railway Vikas Corporation Limited has awarded an order of rupees 44 crore to the company for supply, construction, installation, testing and commissioning of traction transformer SP and associate work. And lastly, HCL Tech can be in focus, where a company has launched managed SSC solution with Cisco, and apart from this, company has expanded partnership with the standard to accelerate AI-led transformation and deliver digital first service at a scale. So back of this, HCL Tech can be in focus.
All right, thank you, Ravinder, for getting us that list of all the stocks that are expected to buzz and trade today. But moving on, now even as global markets grapple with uncertainty, Morgan Stanley is doubling down on India. Top strategists Ridham Desai and Chetana Haya call India an oasis in a desert, backed by solid macro fundamentals, rising capex and a resilient services sector. Here's why the investment giant remains bullish on India's growth story.
India's earnings growth is right up there with the best in the world. And a key point we also make about the Indian financial system at the moment is that bond yields are not volatile. 10-year yields are very well behaved and actually trending downwards in India. And equity market volatility is now well below the average in global equities. The systematic investment plans, the SIPs, and other domestic flows kind of drive that. It's just a very strong story.
If you do a little bit more intrinsic valuation, stocks are cheap. And this is not something that people outside India have completely understood, which is why they are underweight. I think India is in this, is what I term as the oasis in a desert. I suspect as we go into the second half and beyond that, and there is some stability in US policy, corporate issuances will pick up. And that will give an opportunity for foreign investors to continue to engage in Indian stock markets.
India is relatively insulated to the extent to which its exposure to global goods trade cycle is much lower than everybody else. And at the same time, it has this structural domestic demand story, which is also much stronger than the rest of the region. And if you see the trajectory of Indian government, both center plus states taken together, revenue expenditure versus capital expenditure, both the lines are moving in the right direction. Over the last 5 years, we've seen a consistent decline in revenue expenditure to GDP. And that has been taken as an opportunity by the government to increase its capital expenditure to GDP.
With the inflation outlook remaining benign, as I mentioned, you'll see readings closer to say 3.5% in the next few months. And even if you look at 1 year forward inflation forecast, they'll be pretty close to 4%. So, RBI will be comfortable that inflation is durably aligning with its medium-term target of 4%.
Let's also listen to what Mihir Vora, CIO Trust Mutual Fund, had to say about India's EV story and where he is seeing defense sector going forward. He also shared his top sectoral picks. Let's listen into that conversation.
I think it's going to be more of a company by company story.
Okay.
And earlier it was a case of, global companies versus Indian companies. But I think Indian companies have managed to stand their ground, the incumbents. So it was incumbents versus disruptors. But the incumbents have kind of stood their ground. Defense has been one of our favorite sectors, even before the border issue. And that's because of the fact that it's a sector which is coming up for the first time, right? So it's very rarely that you see a sector emerging, right? And this is one sector which was close to the private sector, closed for scrutiny, closed for, this thing. But now government in the last 10 years has made it very serious that they want to indigenize. And once you indigenize, you have the ecosystem up and ready. You're able to export also. We've seen it in sector after sector, In pharma, we were nothing, but now we are the biggest exporters. IT, we were nothing, but now we are the biggest exporters. Auto components, the same. So whenever the private sector is just allowed to be and do its thing, I think we have done well, right? Yeah. And for the first time, we have allowed private sector to come into the defense sector. And I think that's, it's a blue sky scenario. Things like, demographics, digitization, democracy, which are part of our, structural story. Then you have things like digitization, which is technological disruption, in which India has actually leapfrogged into a lot of technology. And then you have, things like physical infrastructure creation, which is going to be the story for the next few years. Every dip is a time to buy, frankly, because as they say, it's about patience and conviction. Your patience will be tested, but your conviction will be rewarded, right? So it's in times like these that you really, go and stick it out, and probably even if you have the, courage and the capacity, add more, so to say. Otherwise, we continue to be neutral to underweight on IT and positive on financials, especially the non-lenders. But after the RBI's action, probably even the lenders are looking as attractive now. Even without Trump and the tariff actions, we were always of the view that the domestic economy will grow faster, domestic segments will grow faster than globally linked segments. So that theme I would agree, we will continue. So financials is mostly a domestic thing, and that's the largest piece of the action. But ex-financials also things like industrial, automotive, components, construction, then utilities, but not the the regulated utilities, but private sector utilities. Those kind of names, I think, will continue to grow faster.
All right, then moving on, let's also get some more commentary on the global markets. Now, Devina Mehra, founder and CMD at First Global, shared with us her stance on global markets. She's underweight in US and overweight on China, Europe and India. Let's listen into her rationale.
So in our global funds, especially since January, we have been underweight the US. So we are overweight Europe. We had slightly increased our fixed income allocation also, though that's also been very volatile now. And we have been overweight China from somewhere last year, and we are slightly overweight India. So that's broadly where we are as far as global funds are concerned. We have been overweight pharma and auto components from almost the beginning of 2024, and that continues. So pharma and healthcare probably in just percentage terms would be our highest overweight. We are last few quarters where weight has been increasing, and now we are overweight is FMCG. So that's one area where we have been increasing weight. We have increased weights in bank, but we are still not overweight. We are still underweight.
Let's get more words of wisdom. Mahesh Patil, CIO, Aditya Birla Sun Life AMC, shares his views on financials. He finds banking valuations reasonable versus the long-term averages and expect them to grow in high single digit in FY26. Let's listen into that conversation.
So now I think it's no longer in a territory where you can say it's undervalued. Okay, valuations are now more reasonable in compared to the long-term average. This year actually would be a period where you will see only a high single-digit kind of a bottom line growth for the banking sector as a whole. So that's not really going to really drive the stock re-rating from here. The real trigger for the banks now here will be the credit growth, because now it's no longer the supply side constraint which is there, right? From the deposit side, I think that's not a challenge. It's on the demand side. If the credit growth picks up, okay, in the say mid-teens, so then I think there's further scope for the banks to do well. NBFCs, yeah, probably would still be better off because there I think the rate cut cycle would act in their favor. IT, the one thing is clear that the overall growth there is not likely to be very strong, while downside also is limited because we are not seeing, I think, the worst fears of a US recession, okay, which I think they are now abating. So I think at least we are not building that in our base case. So given that, I think the risk to IT on the downside, I think, is limited. But I think the overall growth, okay, is going to be in the kind of a mid-single digits. Then I think IT with its kind of a mid-single digit growth, okay, and to some extent the higher dividend yield, which is there around 4% or 3 to 5%, which you see the larger companies, then it offers a good risk reward, okay, for someone to play that. With interest rates coming down, that should support over there. So I think, yeah, clearly, I think urban consumption, I think, can see an up move if we see more rate cuts over there. One would expect the rural incomes to be better this fiscal year, and that could drive rural growth. I think we are seeing that also commentary from a few companies coming in that direction. So given that, I think the outlook on some of these sectors we talked about, whether it is the auto sector, currently the outlook is still weak, right? We are not seeing any kind of pickup, but I think one can really hope that in the second half after the festive season, I think there could be a pickup over there.
All right, then moving on to some more news updates. Now, at least 10 dead and several injured after a gunman opened fire in a school in the city of Graz in Austria. Now, reports say the gunman is also dead in the shooting incident. Meanwhile, Austrian Chancellor Christian Stocker described the school shooting as the darkest day in the country's history. In a latest development, federal appeals court has allowed President Donald Trump's most sweeping tariffs to remain in effect. And the decision comes before the US president's 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariff is set to expire.
Moving on, India's active COVID cases has climbed to 6,815, leading the current spike in Kerala with the 96 fresh infections. Delhi recorded 37 new infections, taking active cases to 691, while Maharashtra reported 89 new COVID-19 cases and 1 death on Tuesday. Moving on, ISRO has announced the postponement of Axiom-4 mission originally set for June 11, 2025, which aimed to send the first Indian Gaganyatri to the ISS. A leak detected during hot test of the Falcon 9 booster stage prompted the delay.
All right, then with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Market Cafe. It's a goodbye from me and Ankur, but stay tuned as the market will take all the action forward.
When the stakes are high and the answers are elusive, there's one voice unafraid to challenge the status quo.
At 8 p.m., I am not here to sugarcoat the truth. I am here to ask the hard questions. Because when others play it safe, I go straight to the heart.